So this week we'll be doing the first maamer, the first beer on the maamer, on this last maamer of Shir and ונאוה, and we'll do that full beer, and then we'll be another class where we'll do the first ois of the second beer. So the beer in Shir and ונאוה, to explain this, the concept or the inyan of shchorani, that I'm black, ונאוה, but beautiful. So the Alter Rebbe explains, as we explained in the previous maamer, that this is the statement of Knesset Israel to the bnei Yerushalayim. And before, he spoke about how this is the neshamas coming down lamata to the neshamas that have not come down. And now the Alter Rebbe is going to put it more in precise idea that we're really talking about malchus itself, that talking to the lower level of malchus, talking to the higher level of malchus. And he says here, now this is the statement of Knesset Israel, which we know Knesset Israel is called the Shekhinah, and it's talking to the bnei Yerushalayim, who are the neshamas that are separated, who are mufshet, they're removed from bodily connection. And so he says, Shechina is a level of malchus of Atzilus that comes down into Biyah, into lower worlds of Bri Yitzir Nasiya, of which it says, V'shachanti b'seicham, that God will dwell amongst us. And as it says, where does he dwell? Hashechan itam b'seich tumasam. He dwells within our impurity, which means in the world of Biyah, which is a world of where it's tumah. So it says, Shchorani, it says, I'm black, but even so I'm nava. To who? To bnei Yerushalayim. Because he explains that the idea of bnei Yerushalayim, daughters of Yerushalayim, that is that the neshamis, before they come down into the world, they are, so to speak, in a situation of Ibor, of a pregnancy within Atzilus. And then afterwards they get born at a level of Lidah in Biyah. And at that point, when they come down into Biyah, they become limited neshamis, so to speak, Bali Gvul. Because he says, the idea of Ein Sof, that something that's unlimited, is only in Atzilus. Which in Atzilus, that's where it ends, the light of the Kav and Chut, the original Ur, that comes through and breaks through the barrier of the Tzimtzum Arishan, of the first Tzimtzum, from the Ur and stuff. And so to speak, the Ur stops within Atzilus, at Malchus of Atzilus. On the other hand, in Biyah, he said not only Malachim of Michal, who is a specific Avodah of Ava, and Gavriel, a specific Avodah of Yira and Pachad. And they say 3 times, again, this is limited numbers, 3 times Kadosh in a period of 12 hours. In other words, all these things are limited things. And these Malachim, as he brings down from the Gemara, that the Gemara says that in the beginning, the Eibusher created Malachim, and he asked them that he wants to make man. And they said, Ma enish kisis keranu, that what is man that we should mention him? And so it says that the Eibusher put his little finger between them and they all got burnt. In other words, what was this idea of putting his little finger? That there was a little added revelation, which was higher than their measurement and their limitation of what they were able to handle, and they get destroyed because of it. And that's what he says. In other words, all these levels lower than Atzilus are limited things. Ein Sof, which means unlimited, is only till the end of the world of Atzilus. And that's what he says in the pasuk, which he also brought in the previous maamer, the idea of that he makes known to man his strength, his greatness, but and the beauty of his splendor, of his kingship, of his splendor. Then, in other words, and here he explains it a little bit. He said like this: that not that the whole level of malchus is enclosed within the creations of Bria Yitzir Nasiya. Rather, only a kavod, a glory of it, a ray, a shine of it. And even so, this little ray, this little shine is hadar. It's a beauty to them. It's hadarhu lahem. But now he says it's not only malachim, but even neshamas, like the neshamas of their forefathers, of Rabbi Yitzchak and Yaakov, that we have the level of Rabbi Yitzchak and Yaakov as they are in Atzilus, where they're iyu v'chayoyu chad, meaning that the light of Hashem and the kalim, it's all one, and therefore the Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov of Atzilus are Ein Sof, they're an endless light. But there's an Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov that come down into Bria, and at that level they're already a limited being. And this limited being happens through the birth of neshamas as they are in Bri Yitzir Nasiya. And on the other hand, where they are still in a pregnancy state, as they are in Atzilus, there we say that he, meaning the Eibush there, and Hashem with the light of Atzilus, and the vessels of Atzilus are all unified as one thing. You can't differentiate between them. Why? Because there it shines the light of the Ein Sof, and these neshamas on the level of Ibor, they're called the daughters of Yerushalayim. Why? Because they are at a level of pregnancy in Malchus, and therefore they're called daughters, so to speak, in a pregnancy, and they're also called with the name Yerushalayim because they get a complete yira, a complete fear of Hashem, mean bittul, a total nullification, and a true one, as we said, that the Eibishter and Atzilus, with the light and the kalim, are all totally one, which is a level of Atzilus, total nullification. And if you look back in the previous Maamar, that this level, we spoke about this idea of Ibor, we're talking about the neshamas as they are before they're coming into the world, and as he says, he'll explain also that what he mentioned before about the Oisius, we'll see that this also connected with this level of neshamas. And he says this is the Maamar of the Shechina that says now to the Bnei Yerushalayim that I am black, and even though I'm beautiful. Why? Because I am black, and the fact that I'm going down into a limited place, into the limited world, and that's where I'm going to become black. Why? Because of the great bitterness, the great hurt or pain that there is on the great distance that I'm going from this supernal unity where all is one, and on this there's a great pain, there's a great rachmanas. As it says, with your great mercy. In other words, this is not only regular mercy, great mercy. And that's why the Malchus is called Shecharcharis, which is called black, but we said 2 levels of black, and he's going to explain these 2 levels again. The first one is the bitterness and the fact that we're so distant. And that's what we see in our own self, the bitterness or the pain of a person when he arouses great mercy on his soul, which this pain, this bitterness, where does it happen? It happens in your cholol hasmoli, hamoli dam, in the side of your heart, which is the side of the nefesh bahamis. And that you feel the pain that you're so far from something that you're far from, and here we're talking about far from the Eibishter. And on this level of pain, or this level of bitterness that there is in Malchus, he says sheshavafani hashemesh, that I've been blackened or tanned by the sun. And here he translates it that the Yechudei Lo, which is called sun and Mogen, the shield of the sun, has left me. When I remember the level of Yechudei Lo, I become black and I become pain because of this. And this is that he explains in Parshas Tazria in the Zohar, that Shesafani Hashemesh means that it has been removed from me, it has ascended from me, the sun from shining within me. In other words, that I'm lacking the Yechudei Lo that I have, and so being far away is pashat painful from where my natural place is. And this is what this is what we say in Maamar Azal, the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah is specifically when the sun sets. Why? Because the main descent of Malchus into Bria Yitzir Nasiya happens in the time when the Beis HaMikdash is not standing, which then it's a time when the sun has ascended and is not shining within me, which that's the idea of Mishateshka Chama, when the sun has set. And so, in other words, to light up this darkness and to light up the neshama, this is through the light of the candle of Chanukah, and you can look in the explanation of Rani V'Simchi Batzian, which he explains the levels of or, light, and the level of oil and the wick, which are all these things are drawing the light down here into this world. And that's, he says also why it says that the mitzvah of Ner Chanukah, the candle of Chanukah, is a rabbinic mitzvah. In other words, and we spoke about before, and we'll speak about here also, the idea of loisaseh. What we get through the negative mitzvahs is from a much higher place, as we've spoken about, than even the mitzvah saseh. Now we know the Zayin mitzvahs derabanan, mainly they're based on a loisaseh. The Leisa says, you're not allowed to move away from what the Rabbanim will tell you, left or right. And so therefore, we have to follow all the mitzvahs Rabbanim, which means that they're be'etzam, they're in essence a negative commandment. Yet, we find in the mitzvahs Rabbanim, which it says that Evim alai divrei seifrim, that the words of the seifrim are even sweeter, is that through the words of the seifrim, we're able to draw down in a positive manner and in a revealed manner, even that which is from a loisasa, which is really beyond revelation. And therefore, this is the idea of Ner Chanukah, that's a mitzvah derabanan, which is an action that we bring down light from which type of a place, from a place which is higher than even what can be revealed. And that is exactly this idea of Shir and ונאוה, that I'm black but yet beautiful. In other words, specifically through the black, I'm able to bring out the greatest beauty. And then he says the second level of black, that's the actual descent, to come down into physical mitzvahs, and not because the sun is not shining on me and I'm lacking my Likkutei Torah, my supernal unity with God, but rather the simple fact, the physical descent itself, that I'm involved in physical things, which with I have to do mitzvahs, which they are kabbanis, from animals, tzitzis, has to be from wool, tefillin, from parchment, etc. And you should look in the Maamar of the end of Vaydaber Midbar Sinai, which there he speaks about the level of the Rachmanis of the 12 Shvatim. So actually there in the Maamar he explains that there's three levels. Level of Yaakov, which is a general Rachmanis the world. Then there's a level of the Rachmanis of the 12 Shvatim, which is a lower level of Rachmanis, as he says here, that you have mercy and pain on the actual godly spark that has descended from its honorable location where it was before it descended. Then there's another level of Rachmanis, of pain and of mercy, which is the 70 souls that are the ones who come out from Yaakov and go down into Mitzrayim, which they are the ones that arouse great mercy on your own soul, and not because of the fact that it's just descended from its place, but rather that it came into a physical body. And these are the same, he says, these last two levels are the same two levels here, of these levels of black. Number one, that it descended from its level of Likkutei Torah. The second one, that it's come down into a physical body and into physical mitzvahs. He said, but yet this is its comfort, that even though I'm black, even so, I'm beautiful. In other words, from this black itself, I become this level of beautiful. Why? Because through this blackness and this pain and this darkness and this bitterness of being so far, through that becomes Rav Tuis B'Keach Shar, meaning specifically through the animal, we're able to harvest so much more than just a man could accomplish by himself. Why? Because when we break the Sitra Achra, we break the side of evil, we break our evil inclination, etc., then Estalik, the glory of God gets revealed throughout all the worlds, etc., and therefore there's a much greater light and connection with Hashem that happens specifically when we do it through the darkness. And also through the darkness that we come and get enclosed within the physical mitzvahs, which the mitzvahs are 613 pathways of light. And so too, together with the 7 Rabbanan, which is 620, which is a level of Keser, which that is the level of, Keser means the crown, the supernal desire. 6 is a lower level of desire, which that is the desire that gets drawn from Chachma and Bina to Midas, which means, in simple, the reason, so to speak. There's a certain ratzin, there's a certain desire, a desire of Torah, so to speak, that is there for the Midas, for the different emotions. But then there's a higher level of ratzin, which is the intermediate between the emanator and the emanations. In other words, from the level of Keser itself, which is a desire, the essential desire for it all. Like, why the Midas? Why everything? This is a much deeper inner desire. And this is only accomplished through the 613 mitzvahs as they are down here in this world, specifically with the addition of the 7 Rabbanan, which reveal this higher desire, which is generally hidden from us. And this is where it says that I'm beautiful, even more so than the daughters of Yerushalayim, which they are the souls as they are in Atzilus, that even though that their place is in Atzilus itself, and they don't have this descent in Biyah, yet where do they get their whole life force from? Those neshamas, they get it from the letters, because there's 600,000 neshamas, which as they are equal to the 600,000 letters of the Torah. And these letters ultimately are vessels. What are an ice? An ice, a letter is only a vessel. Yet it's true that the neshamas come from the inner levels of the vessels. They are from the inner kalim, the pnimius kalim of Atzilus. But yet they're still only kalim, they're only vessels. On the other hand, through that which the Malchus comes out into this world, then it could ascend to an even higher level, to the levels of the light itself. And not only that, it goes higher and higher to the highest of levels until the essence of the Ein Sof that's totally simplistic, meaning one that is removed from all types of differentiations or any way of divisions, where it's totally one. At that level is where the soul could elevate and Malchus could go up once it comes down through this world and it reaches the highest of levels. Then he continues, he says, Ka'oli Kedar, he said, I'm black, yet I'm beautiful. And he continues like the tents of Kedar. So he says, we said the tents of Kedar are two things here. Number one, there's an outer tent, which is black, and an inner one that is white. But also the word Kedar means blackened. So this refers to Avram, who came out from him, Yishmael, which means a level of Kedar, a certain level of imperfection and dirt, etc. He says, yet there has to be some type of holiness, some type of godly life force, a little one of holiness that is in this black, that's in this Kedar. Because if not, it wouldn't exist. Nothing could exist without a godly spark within it. Only that this life force that's within it is in a superficial, makif way. In other words, it is beyond it. It gives it its whole life force, it's true, but it's not something that could be recognized. It's almost like we'll say about ourselves, I'm going off the mimer, but we're all made of atoms, yet we don't see the atoms within us, we don't know the atoms within us. They're makif, they're not something that we actually could relate to within us, even though they're our entire existence. The same way, this chayes of kedusha has to be the very essential existence of this whole thing, or else it wouldn't exist, yet at the same time, it's not something that can be related to whatsoever. So it's makif. And this is the idea of the levina, the spice of levina that was in the 11 spices of the Torahs. Because we know that there are 10 spices in the Torahs. They are the ones that go down and get involved in klipa. But the 11th one is, so to speak, a makif. It's above of it all. And it's essentially white, meaning it's all perfect. It's all white. It's fully kedusha. And this is what it says, like the tents of Kedar, because they have this surrounding godly life force as well. And the same way by me, in other words, when I come down into this world, I have the level of a so to speak, a oil, a makif, a surrounding and essential light that comes from the level of Yichudi Ilah, which that is the level of the sun that has blackened me, as we spoke about before. And by meaning, he's saying in the beer here, in the footnote, he's explaining this even now to understand this better. He says that even though there's a makif that gives a life force to every single physical thing, as we know, it comes from the shviras hakelim, meaning when we have the whole physical world, it's through the breaking and the destruction of but the breaking and the explosion of the vessels of toyu that come down into pieces and parts, and they make up all the physical things of this world. And we say all of those things, they have within it ultimately a 11th godly spark that is their very essence, that is their makif, that is beyond them, yet it's within them. So how much more so when we these supernal makifim, when we fulfill the mitzvahs, and we refine these physical things that have been broken from shvira, from the toyu. In other words, and we're fixing them through the avodah of refining with tikkun, refining them, and we're getting rid of the evil. How much more so that there must be the same and even greater makif that's in it than would have been naturally. And he said, look in the Maamar of Yibshalach Parei about the idea of if to the ones who are oiver, the ones who go against Hashem's will, they have such holiness, so to speak, hidden within them. How much more so to those who do alachas kama v'kama? How much more so you have to say that godly makif is there within them and is revealed, etc. Then he says, Kiriyah Shloimeh, like the actual curtains of Shloimeh. He said this is a higher level of makifim. He says because ultimately there's two makifim, there are two levels that are essential levels that are beyond our grasp, and he says these are both. One is revealed now. The second one only can be revealed when Mashiach will come. And he said these are called the Urias of Shloimeh, the curtains of Shloimeh. And he says it's based on the pasuk Yachzik b'mu'uzi, that if you hold into my shelter. Then it says, Yasa Shalom Li, Shalom Yasali. It says, I'll make Shalom for you, and you'll make Shalom for me, so to speak. It's this double term. So he says, what does it say Shalom means? Is the connection and the bringing together of two opposite things. Which means, what are the two opposites? The highest lights, that their nature is to ascend and to leave, so to speak, above, that they should actually shine all the way down here below. in its opposite place. And therefore, why twice shalom? That's in the higher realms and in the lower realms. In the lower realms, this is the idea of Malchus Datzilis, that it should become the crown and the, so to speak, the creator of Bria. And then what is the idea of the higher realms? This is that you should draw down the level of Ein Sof into, it says it a little bit entry, but into the level of Chachma, which we say, Kulam b'Chachma Sisa, that all is made with Chachma, but also the term here could be means that Chachma itself is considered a physical creation, like a physical thing before God, that the level of, that it could be an atik to Atzilus, meaning that the Ein Sof before Atzilus could become the endless light of God, before Atzilus could become a level of atik to Atzilus. And he says anybody who learns Torah Lishma, in other words, through calling in the letters of Torah, could draw this down. And that's why it says that God answers all those that nekראו be'emes, who call him out with truth. And he says truth here means Torah, because we know Chachma is called true. And as Rabbi says, Torah comes from the level of Chachma. And so what does it mean to call him out in truth? In other words, through the truth you should call him. In other words, you should draw him down. And this is what's called the curtains of Shlema, with the higher hay and then with the lower hay, which is these two levels, so to speak, of these two Keser Atiks, the Atik of Atzilus and the Atik of Bria. And he says, now the idea of Shalom and Shlema themselves, that is the way it gets drawn down into the worlds, and he makes, Shalom makes peace between the higher light and the way it's down here in the world, and we connect these two. But when we say, like the curtains of Shlema, that means the higher level, these makifim, these supernal levels, which there is nothing similar to it in Klippus at all. Because the level of the tents of Kedar, which that's the level of the Levina, that is connected to, there's a counterpart. You have the makif in the holy level, you have the makif in the Klippa, which is its holy level, but you have it in both levels. But in comparison to the level of Yerushalima, the curtains of Shlema, there is nothing, there's no opposite, there's no correspondent letter to it whatsoever, and it'll only be revealed when Mashiach will come. And this is what it says, I'm black, in two levels of black. And even so, I'll be beautiful. And he says, now this really is all connected, it's all hinted to in the pasuk, Mipnei Seva Takum. So the whole pasuk is, Mipnei Seva Takum, that you should get up for someone who is older. Vadarta Pnei Zaken, you should honor one who is Pnei Zaken, is the face. It means a person who's a wise person. And then the pasuk continues, and you should fear God. And so he says this pasuk hints to everything that this mimer has saying. That what does Seva mean? That's the level of his white hair is like white. The hair of his head is like white wool. That's the level of white hairs, which that is the levels of all the mitzvahs or mitzvahs aseh, which we draw down one level. Then there is Vadata Pnei Zaken, which is the face, the Zaken is the one who acquired wisdom. That's the black hairs that are like a raven, which come from Chachma. And these are the ones that come down the level of mitzvahs loisasa, which we spoke about as a higher level than the level of the letters that come from the white hairs. And then V'reisem Elikacha, that's the addition of the mitzvahs d'Rabbanan, that you should fear God. As we say, that the words of the Seifrim, of the rabbis, are more strict than even the words of Torah. And then, when we have all this, Ani Hashem, the pasuk ends, I am God, the Kul Echad, all these are really and truly one. And through it all, we become one with the Eibishter, Mamish, Venava, and most beautiful. So, we're now going to do the Maimer, the second biur on Shchira and Venava, which starts on Zion Amid Daled. And this Maimer is, we're just going to do the first ice today. In this, and then we'll continue. It's a longer Maimer. Again, remember that this was a biur. We had spoken before that the neshamas that are coming down to the world, which is the Shechina, Malchus that comes down to the world, is speaking to Malchus, as we said in the previous Maimer, where the neshamas are in a pregnancy before they come into the world, and are not coming down into the world. So we're talking in this level of Malchus, which is a intermediary, so to speak, between Atzilus and Bria, the world of emanation and the world of creation. And we spoke in the previous Maamar as well, about how it's drawing through the darkness that we go into, we're able to draw from Atzmos, from the essence of the light. And so now he's going to explain, at least in the beginning of this Maamar, as we are now, it's going to be more of a understanding of how this is in the spiritual realms, in the spiritual and godly spheres. So he begins that between the Maitzel and Etzalim, meaning between the emanator and that which emanates, there has to be an intermediary, as explained in Eitz Chaim. And he says here, Shar Mem Gimel, the 41st gate, chapter 3. I believe that today it is in our prints, it's Mem Beis Perik Aleph. At least that's what I think he says in the back. And a lot of these quotes from some of these Mekaydes of Eitz Chaim, there's a newer print, and so it's a different page. And so this is explained that there has to be an intermediary between a higher level and a lower level. In other words, the creator and the creation, here the emanator and the emanation, which are similar concepts. There has to be an intermediary level. And he says the reason is, and the Alter Rebbe now is explaining, is because the light, or the Eibishter, but we're talking here more the light, is not of the midos. It is basically beyond the realm of any type of character or realm or sphera, whichever word we want to use for the midas at this level. And he says even in the 10th spheres, what we call the sphera, the of chachma, of wisdom, really we're referring to the vessel that limits the light of the 10 spheres. That is called chachma. Same thing, bina or chesed. It is the keli, it's the vessel that's limiting the light to shine only a certain way. That's what we're calling the vessel chachma. But the essential light, you can't call it with the term chachma. Rather, it is only the light that creates and brings about the sphera of chachma. And this light is only a ray, a shine from the essence of the emanator, and it actually does not cause any change whatsoever within the essence of the emanator, within the essence of God, within the essence of the Ein Sof. I'm using these two terms separately. In the essence, so to speak, it doesn't make any change. And that's what it says, that I am God, I do not change. I never change. In other words, just before the worlds were created, same way afterwards. It doesn't cause any change within the Creator. And so the Alter said, with this will be explained and answered the question of the philosophers that they ask, how do we have all these titles and descriptive words on Hashem, and we're saying that they don't cause any change in the essence of Hashem, because he says that they're not at all connected. They're not, so to speak, shayach is the right word here, to the atzmos, to the essence. And he says right now in the bracket, he's going to go now and explain this at length. So he says, meaning that which it says in the Torah, that it says under his feet, tachas raglav. It's a verse. Or it says written with the finger of God, again, finger of God, the eyes of God, the ears of God, and such things. So there's two questions here. Number one is the fact itself that we're using such terms on God. The second issue is going to be, if we do use these terms, and what does it mean that God doesn't change? So let's see, that it causes no change in God. So he says it's already at length explained in Pardes, Shar Chav Beis, Perik Aleph, and also in the Hashalah in his introduction, and you should check their well explained, like well explanation. So at least in the Pardes, he explains that the idea is that really in the heavenly realms there's something that is the mouth or the eye or whatever it is, which is really a spiritual and a non-physical thing. It's beyond anything we could describe, which is really the source of all eyes, the source of all ears. We, with the Hebrew tongue and Lashon Kodesh and down here on earth, we're given the gift by Hashem that we are able to call an ear to understand that it's somehow relatable and it comes from that level. But really at that level, it's more of a concept of, so to speak, something that hears. I don't want to say the word hear, even that is something that's not by the Eibishter, but the idea is a comprehension. And he says, even this, that we're saying that there's something in this spiritual realm that is called an ear, which therefore would mean some type of change because it could hear, so to speak, it could comprehend, it could understand. Yet, this is only in the 10 spheres. And we'll see in a moment what this means. Only in the 10 spheres. But similar to what he said before, it's only in the kalim, in the vessels. And he said the same thing also we find with the emotions that we say about Hashem, the midas. We say that he is merciful, or he is noikim, he is one who takes revenge against the wicked. So even though the supernal midas are not even close in the type of emotions that we have within creations, and as it's explained in different places, it says in Igarsa Kodesh, Lahav Mashal Malitza, yet still this is only within the realms of the vessels of the 10 spheres itself. As the Tikkunei Zohar says, that all of these are to show how the world runs, but he is not of the midas whatsoever. And the same thing look in Sefer Shalbeinanim, and you'll see there in the Likkutei Amarim and some of the Haggas that he mentions here, which there he explains at length how the unity, so to speak, that happens between the Or and the Kli, the vessel and the light, and they become, so to speak, one. And it's specifically in the world of Atzilus where this unity happens, not above it. There is not even the vessel that we say it unites, and not in the lower levels. In the level of Atzilus itself, there's this unity between vessel and light that you could use a description of the vessel on the light and the descriptions of the light on the vessel. He says, yet this becomes attributed to Hashem himself, that he is the merciful one, he is the kind one, he is the one who is taking revenge. Why and how? Through that, with the light of God is shining in these vessels to give them their life, and the light is totally one within them, as it says that he in Atzilus and his light and his vessels are one. So in this oneness, you're able to say, in other words, because of the fact that there's this attribute of mercy, you could say merciful, because God's light, which is him, so to speak, at least it's the shine and the ray from him that's in that light, it's in the mercy. So I could say it's he. So together I could say he is merciful. But yet, this will not cause any change whatsoever within the essence of God. Why? Because even the light that's coming down in the 10 spheres is only like a ray and a shine from God, but his essence is totally holy and removed, and it's not similar to a soul that it itself comes down into a body. Only a ray, so to speak, a light of it comes into these 10 spheres. And so even more than this, it's written in the Pardes, in the Gate of Atzmus V'Kelim, Chapter 4, that even in the light and in this ray that's involved, that's in the vessels of the 10 spheres, there's actually within the light, in the essence of the light, there's no color or element of description whatsoever. There's not judgment, there's not mercy, there's not right, there's not left. In other words, even though the very fact that there comes a mercy or a judgment, it comes specifically through the light, but it's only the light as it comes through the vessel. In other words, the whole descriptive part of whatever is happening is only coming because of the part that the vessel brings to it. From the light perspective, it is totally pure and not of any of these differences whatsoever. And he says, so the vessels of Atzilus are also, we know, totally godly. As we say, he and his vessels are one. And even the light that brings about these spheres, as we said, is only like the ray of the sun that doesn't cause any change within the luminary and the source of the light. And therefore it's called the Or Ein Sof, which is from the term of, it's a it's a light, it's a ray, it's only a shine. But Yet, even so, even for this light of the Ein Sof to come into a revealed way, that actually from it there should come a sphira. There first has to be an intermediary between the emanator and that which is emanated. And only then is the Ein Sof able to create and give life to the spheres, and this intermediary is called the Kesser, the crown, which means it has two parts to it. It has within it the lowest level of the emanator, and it has within it the first level, the source of all emanations. In other words, it has the lowest level of creator and the highest of the creation. And therefore, sometimes the crown is called the light of the Ein Sof, which is, when we look at it from its perspective, it's the last level of the emanator. In other words, at that point, you won't count it within the 10 spheres of Atzilus at all. And then, from the perspective, the other perspective, as it is the source of all emanations, then it could be counted as one of the 10 spheres, and therefore it's considered an intermediary. And that's when we call Das, is when we count Das, is when we count it as the head of the emanations. And when we say it's Kesser and we don't count it, that is when we count Kesser as one of the 10, and we don't count Das, that is when it's one of the emanations. And when we count Das and not Kesser, then we're talking about Kesser being the last level of the emanator, of the creator, which is above. And he says, because the essence, the identity, so to speak, of the emanator, which is the essence of the Ein Sof, is not within the realms of the worlds whatsoever, that it could come in a revealed way of being of shining and giving a hashpah, and even in the world of Atzilus without this intermediary level. Okay, so now he goes into another point here, and he says, and so that which you have to understand, how can we say in the Ein Sof the lowest level? Because there's no beginning or end, only in space where you could say a head and an end, a beginning and an end, which is in the 10 spheres, which there Chachma is called the beginning of all evolvement of the world, and the Malchus is called the lowest or the end of all levels. On the other hand, in Eitzav Baruch Hu, which has no beginning and it has no end, and it's totally simplistic, so to speak, in the greatest simplicity, meaning it's totally unlimited, how do you say an end? So he says you could say, according to what's explained in many places in the explanation of what our rabbis have said, that until the world was created, there was he and his name and alone. And it's not the question, why and how is it possible that before the creation of the worlds, there should be a level of name to God? Who should call him with this name? A name is for somebody else to call you. There's nothing else. There's no worlds yet. So why does he have a name? No, the only idea here is that the spreading of in other words, this emanation of life force that comes from God to give life to all the worlds in the 10 spheres, that this entire spreading forth and the drawing of this emanation or this light is only a level of name. In other words, it's only like a name to a person, which means it is only a ray and a shine, and it's not really of your essence whatsoever, and yet it is called the light. This is called the light of the Ein Sof. But the essence of God is much more exalted and beyond. As we say, I am God, I've never changed, and it doesn't change whatsoever. And it means as follows, that even before the world was created, this already existed. How did that exist? And that's what he says here. The fact that there was this ability that he should become revealed, and it should be drawn from him a light and some ray by God's decision, in his pure desire. This itself is called his name, which was there before the world was created. That this possibility, this ability, is called the level of Shmai, of name, which was within his essence. And this level is called the last level that's in the emanator. Now, just like the name of a person, so to speak, is totally like nothing in comparison to yourself, and from this level of name itself, which is like totally nothing compared to the essence of God, it's just the ability, the possibility that there could be revelation. From this level itself is where it comes this ability to be an atik, and there should be this crown for Atzilus. And it's very right to call this level the last level, according to the language that's explained in other places, because this is not the main level of godliness. In other words, the main level of godliness is that which is not that which the worlds exist from it and get their life force, and they get everything from godliness. Because God is as he was before the world was created and after the world was created equally. And if he wouldn't have created any worlds, still he would be the same, and everything would be equal before him, and it's still equal before him as if he wouldn't have created it. Only that which he gives life and he creates all the worlds is only a ray, a shine from God. And that's the life force of all the evolved worlds. But the essence of the God himself, of the essence, so to speak, is much higher beyond any realms from this light, which is the life of all the worlds. And it's completely considered like nothing before him. And therefore this ray is called the lowest level from everything that there is in the Ein Sof, which is the emanator, blessed be he. Because he says, because even this level of light that spreads, so to speak, from the sun, it's very simple that this light, if it's on the earth, it's also within the sun itself. And yet, as we say in Shir, I'll say that in a second, it's this light is considering the sun like total nothingness in comparison to the actual body of the sun, which is the source of this light. And he says at length in Sefer Shabbenim Shar Yichud and Amunah and chapter 3. Because when within the sun, it doesn't fall upon it the name of an existence of its own whatsoever. Only there it is totally nothingness, because in truth, he is their total nothingness. And so, when it comes to the sun, he's going to explain. When it comes to the sun, the light of the sun shines against the will of the sun. It has to shine. But how much more so, it would say, with a kol shekein al kavachomer of tens of thousands, separations, without any, beyond any measurement, so to speak, that when it comes to the Eibishter, when it comes to God, the revelation of the light is by his choice, which means it's even more separated than the light of the sun from the sun itself. And if so, this power that's within the essence is totally like nothing in comparison to the essence of God. Just like the name of a man is like nothing in comparison to his essence. And that's what it says that before that total world was created, he and his name were the only things, were the only. And this is what the Arizal says. This term, the lowest, the lowest level, or the last level that there can be from all that there could be. And from the words of the Arizal, it's a clear and strong proof, complete proof to what it says in many places, that the meaning of the Ein Sof is speaking about the light and the revelation of God. In other words, but not the essence, so to speak. Just like the example we gave before of the luminary, which is the source of the light. Because if so, what do you say the last level and the lowest of levels from the whole Ein Sof? What is the Arizal referring to? Only for sure, he's talking about this light and this ray, and that's the lowest level. And the same thing is also explained by the Ramaz and the Haggah in the beginning of Tzis Chaim. And this is what he says, that specifically only this light of the Ein Sof, but not from the essence, it's not from the essence of God, so to speak. And this is also what he continues, and he says, meaning to say, it's from his light itself he shined down here. And also in the introduction to his Sefer Yonis Elam, he writes that the Ein Sof is only could be said on the name of his blessed be he, but not his essence. But now here the Alter Rebbe continues and says, or this is still at Tzemach Tzedek. Anyway, but even though it's true and correct that on only the light itself, you could say what it says in Eitz Chaim, the lowest level, but yet in truth, the meaning of the lowest level of the Ein Sof that he's saying in Eitz Chaim, he doesn't mean on the general that the entire light is the last level of the light, so to speak, before creation, or ever, in other words, a whole Ein Sof is called the last level. Rather, he's saying even more so, that the last level that's in the light, in other words, from the entire light that's only a ray, etc., from that entire thing, the lowest part of that is what becomes the atik to Atzilus. As it's known, in the beginning there was a contraction of the light, a tzimtzum, and afterwards there comes it gets drawn down what's called the kav and chut, the thread and light itself that comes from the Ein Sof. That means from the Ein Sof itself, there's only a small light that comes from there into the creations and the making of the worlds of Atzilus. And this Kavi says that's what's called the last level in comparison to the light. And you can look in this, about this concept in an explanation of the Maimer of Nisi V'Hinim Ezov, and also in the Maimer Vidlush Malchus. And from this Kav is where it becomes this level of Atik of Atzilus. And so he says at this level of Atik, it actually is drawn and it encloses in the level of Arich Ampin, which is the source and the and the root of all emanations. So here we have this Kesser, this duality. There's, as we said in the Kesser, in the crown, there's the lowest level of the emanator, which is the level of Atik, which is the level of the Kav V'chut that has come after the Tzimtzum, which is only a ray from the Or Ein Sof, which is only a ray of revelation from Hashem. And then God comes down into the level of Arich, which is the source of all emanations and of Atzilus. And that's where it says that the Kesser is called the intermediary between the emanator and the emanations. That means that in order that there should be the light of the Or Ein Sof, that it could be able to be drawn down and enclose itself in the vessels of the 10 spheres of Atzilus, it's only first through coming down and enclosing itself in the lowest level of the light and this ray and the source of the spheres, which is in this level of Kesser, which is called the source of all emanations, which is, so to speak, so much higher from a level of individual 10 spheres, and also includes them all together. In other words, even in the level of Arich, at that level, where the 10 spheres don't exist as 10 individual things. It's inclusive as one, and it's beyond them all. And through this, only afterwards, it could come down, you could draw down the light from this level. That now from this, so to speak, general 10 spheres, however we will call this, there could come down now a light that could enclose itself within the 10, in the detailed vessels of the 10 spheres, in every vessel according to its way. And now look in Sefer Shabbat in Perik, in the Tanya, chapter 51, which there the example and the nimshal that he gives, that he mentions there, will understand what's here in a most more wondrous way. And there he explains that even, so to speak, the neshama, as it comes down into the body, even though it gives the power for sight and everything else that happens, which are individual vessels, the soul itself, even as it's giving the ability to see, there's not a part of the soul that is a power of sight. There's a soul that is a spiritual thing that has the power for all the things that the body will do. And as it shines into every individual part of the body, that part of the body animates in accordance with the power that the soul is giving it. But ultimately, the soul doesn't change. And even as the soul is within that body, the soul is still completely pashat, as we say. It's pure. It's not divided into these things. How much more so the way the soul is before it actually came down into these things, that it didn't even become the source yet for those things. It's all a united, simplistic power that has the power to basically empower any part of the body. But what is it itself? None of the above. It's none of these individual things whatsoever. And so it's the same thing, so to speak, here, that at the level that the 10 spheres are getting it, is the light is coming through, but the light is still totally pure. The light is unchanged, even as it's coming into the 10 spheres. But it gives the ability for the 10 spheres, which is the vessel, to animate in a way that he is merciful, etc. And this goes back to the point we're saying before. Ultimately, in the light, there's never been a change, which means that God, all these different spheres and all these different emotions and all these different things that we attribute to God, he heard, he saw, etc., etc., ultimately, these are descriptions of the vessels, and there's actually no change within the light, so to speak, whatsoever, and therefore, God never changes whatsoever, and that's where we finish the first ice of this Maamar.